"You're a fax machine at a Zoom meeting." That's what he said, word for word. I sat there in that glass-walled conference room on the 12th floor of Meridian Financial Partners, staring at my reflection in the polished table as those words echoed around the room. The smell of burnt coffee clung to the air, faint hum of the air conditioning filling the silence that followed. Mark Dempsey leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, the corner of his mouth twitching with that half-smile I used to mistake for confidence. "My name's Daniel Holt, 51 years old, senior account strategist. 22 years in this building, starting from a cubicle so small I could touch both walls if I stretched. I'd been here longer than most of the furniture. I built this firm's client portfolio when we were just 3 guys sharing one phone line and a dream about being different. Back then, Mark used to call me his right hand. Now I was apparently a piece of office equipment that time had outpaced. He didn't even flinch when he said it again. "It's not personal, Dan. You've just aged out. Aged out. Like milk, like a product that had hit its expiration date." I didn't react. Couldn't. Corporate survival trains you to hold steady, even while the floor gives out beneath you. So I looked at him, the man who used to grab beers with me after late nights, closing deals, and I just nodded. My throat was dry, but I kept my tone professional. "So, what's the plan?" He slid a folder across the table. The tab read "Transition Outline" in his assistant's neat handwriting. Inside was a name I'd never seen before: Chloe Dempsey. His niece, 23, fresh out of college, marketing degree, minor in digital media. No work history. "She's eager to learn," Mark said, like he was giving me a charity project. "You'll help her adjust, show her the ropes. Make sure the handoff goes smoothly." The handoff. That's what he called it. Not the demotion. Not the replacement. The handoff. She arrived 10 minutes later, phone in hand, iced coffee sweating on the table as she dropped into the chair beside him. "Hey, Uncle Mark," she said, voice sing-song bright. Then, turning to me, "You must be Mr. Holt." "Sir." "Mr. Holt." Like I was already a relic. I smiled. Mechanical. "Welcome aboard." She grinned, already distracted by a notification flashing across her phone screen. When she looked back up, she was all sugar and charm. "I'm so excited to work with you. Uncle Mark says you're basically the backbone of the place." Backbone. Past tense, apparently. By the end of the day, she was asking how to log into the CRM system, the same one I'd designed, customized, and personally trained half the staff to use. I showed her, step by step, watched her nod while her eyes darted to her phone again. She took a few notes, thanked me, and then at 4:30 she stood up, grabbing her purse. "I've got dinner plans. Could you finish this client proposal for me? It's due tomorrow." I could have said no. I could have reminded her that my name was still on that account, but 22 years of habit die hard. So I said, "Of course." After she left, I stayed another 3 hours finalizing her work. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, echoing the hum in my chest. I'd done this routine 1,000 times before cleaning up after someone else, saving the client, making Mark look good. But this time, something was different. When I finally left, the parking lot was nearly empty. My car sat alone under a flickering lamp. As I started the engine, a pair of headlights swept across the lot. Mark's BMW, the same one he told everyone he'd sold to cut costs. Chloe was driving it. He was in the passenger seat, laughing. They didn't see me. I watched the car disappear into the city lights, and for a moment, I just sat there, hands tight on the steering wheel. My pulse drummed in my ears, not from anger, not yet, but from something colder. I'd given this company everything, missed anniversaries, birthdays, holidays. I'd carried it through market crashes and mergers, and now, in one sentence, I'd been filed under Obsolete. I turned off the engine and sat in the dark. The glow of the empty building reflected in the windshield. For the first time in 22 years, I wasn't thinking about tomorrow's workload or next quarter's numbers. I was thinking about the kind of man who could tell another he's a fax machine at a Zoom meeting and believe he'd get away with it. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I wasn't angry, just awake. I come in the next morning like nothing happened. I make fresh coffee, set a mug on Mark's desk, even though he doesn't drink it, and offer the intern a smile that says, "I'm fine. I always have been." They believe it. That's the mistake people make with men who've been indispensable for 2 decades. They see the calm and mistake it for complacency. Calm is a tool. Composure is data gathering in slow motion. I built every system in this place, every client file architecture, every encryption key, every password hierarchy, every incremental backup that anyone ever relied on when the servers hiccuped. I know where the receipts hide, where the archived emails sleep, which shell account routes to which subsidiary. Mark can hand a job to his niece and print a transition plan, but he can't unlearn the fact that I hold the keys, and keys open doors you don't want people walking through. Chloe sits at her desk, like she owns the view. She's smiling at a meme, fingers moving fast across her phone, the kind of distracted focus that reads as entitlement more than curiosity. Her project folder shows at first glance as neat tiles and color-coded tags. I click deeper. Empty templates. Half a sentence in the proposal drafts. The headers read like mine. The language a pale. The imitation of the tone I taught everyone to use. She's been taking credit for work she didn't do, repackaging my templates, and sending them under the new team banner so the inbox looks full. The illusions of competence are easy when someone else carries the workload. I print one quietly, the printer humming like it doesn't betray anything. I fold the paper into my folder and slide it into my briefcase. Evidence is a small thing. At first, a timestamp, a copied paragraph, a typo that links drafts across weeks. Evidence grows when you follow it. I don't rush. Rushing leaves fingerprints. I settle into methodical. At lunch, Mark strolls by my desk, the same casual step he's practiced for years. "Transition's going well, Dan," he says, nodding to the young woman who's still scrolling. "Smooth as fiber optic." I answer with a smile, "That's all business." He laughs, not realizing the line he's crossed. Fiber optic. Speed. Reliability. The joke lands like a test, and he thinks he's passed. But the joke is mine now. I know how fast threads can propagate through a network. I know how quickly an error can become an epidemic. I start documenting. Screenshots at 11-second intervals, server logs that show which user pulled, what file and when. Timestamps that triangulate movement across platforms. I archive email headers. I trace payment batches. Every click she makes, every upload, every sent notification, it's a breadcrumb. I build a map of their behavior the way I used to map client portfolios, nodes and lines, dependencies and leaks. When you've spent 2 decades preserving continuity for other people, you learn how to read the patterns of deception. By midweek, the pattern is a map, and the map is ugly. Mark has been rerouting client contracts to shell companies under Chloe's account names. There are false expense reports, padded with vendor fees that don't exist. Ghost vendors with matching addresses that point back to a private account, flagged on state registries. The money moves in small increments, so nobody notices at first. A few thousand here, a consulting fee there, the kind of math executives rationalize as operational necessity. But numbers never lie when you let them speak in sequence. I don't sleep that night. I lie awake thinking in logs and ledgers. The anger is quiet, not the hot flare of losing temper, but the cold wind before a storm, the kind that strips leaves from a tree and leaves the trunk exposed. I replay conversations, the way Mark's tone shifted when he said, "aged out," the way Chloe's laugh sounded more like a strategy than a reaction. I could go to HR. I could make a scene and watch the company perform its ritual of complaint and deflection. HR works for Mark. They attend his fundraisers and know his niece's boyfriend. The system is skewed toward protecting the visible structure, not the truth beneath it. So I decide on a cleaner approach, not revenge for revenge's sake, but structural correction. Late that night, I sit at my desk with the office empty, and I create a new directory on my desktop. The name is deliberate. It needs to be anonymous, but meaningful. I type project. Echo. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's a plan. It echoes back everything they've tried to bury, and it will be harder to dismiss than a complaint form. I close the laptop and walk out under a sky so clear the stars look like data points. The building behind me hums, oblivious, while I carry a folder of printed pages and a patience I haven't needed to use in years. The work begins in the morning. Monday morning. The building smelled like new carpet and recycled ambition. Mark opened the company-wide meeting with a slide deck full of buzzwords: synergy, digital pivot, client-first innovation. Chloe stood beside him, hair perfect, smile fixed in the way of someone who's been coached on how to look like she earned it. My name didn't appear once on the slides. That was fine. Names are flattered in headlines. Power lives in the back end. While they spoke about streamlining and reallocating resources, I was halfway into the systems console, the only place in this place that still felt like private property to me. I'd written the client portal from scratch. I knew the patch schedules, the fallback routes when payments stalled, the way our foreign accounts mirrored domestic ledgers. My access key was a master key the IT team treated like a relic. It worked, so they didn't touch it. That kind of institutional ignorance is useful when you want to move without being seen. I put a tracer on one of the directories, elegant, invisible, configured to report only to an address that existed nowhere but a sandbox I controlled. It would note every file alteration, every download, every account reassignment, and it would leave no log in the usual places someone like Mark would check first. You learn how to be covert when you've spent time covering other people's mistakes. It's the same mindset as keeping a safe route through hostile territory. The tracer was the ghost of me inside their system, and ghosts are patient. After the meeting, Mark came by my desk with that practiced casualness he reserves for people he's about to discard. "You've still got a place here for now, Dan," he said, too familiar, like this was an act of mercy. "But maybe start planning your exit." I told him I was already thinking about it. He didn't ask what that meant. People who think they're in charge don't ask. That night the office emptied and the city quieted. I stayed. The glow of screens looked like map coordinates. I cataloged every client record I'd touched over 22 years and began the transfer. It was methodical work. Export, checksum, encrypt, verify. Years compressed into compressed files, nested and labeled with the precision of someone who has always had to be able to recreate a lost account from memory. The drive I used was small and unremarkable, the kind a courier would swallow without noticing. I labeled nothing on the outside. The thing that had once been intangible, my career, my reputation, became a black rectangle, the size of a cigarette pack that fit in my palm. I didn't rush the transfer. Rushing risks corruption, and I'd learned that integrity mattered more than speed. Each file verified against its original, each client signature intact, each timestamp preserved. The work felt like loading a weapon slowly, checking the mechanism, making sure everything clicked the way it should before closing the chamber. When the last archive completed, I unmounted the drive, tucked it in the inner pocket of my coat, and walked the floor to clear my head. Outside Chloe's office, I paused because I heard her laugh. She was on the phone, animated, casual, saying exactly what I suspected she would say when she thought no one was listening. "Yeah, Uncle Mark says he'll promote me again once the old guy's gone." The phrase landed like a stone. The old guy. She didn't know I could hear. She didn't know I had a direct line into the system she'd been feeding on. I stood in the doorway and listened, memorizing tone and cadence, the small inflection that betrays rehearsed lines. People reveal themselves in the places they think are private. In the parking lot, the windows of the office were mostly dark, rectangles cooling into night. One light remained on the 12th floor, a thin square where silhouettes moved. Mark and Chloe, side by side, too close for a simple family conference. I watched them through the glass until the light went out. There are moments that act like a final click on a lock. Watching those two shape themselves into a lie was that click for me. I walked to my car with the drive in my pocket and felt something shift inside me. Not the sudden flare of anger, but a clarity, like steel being drawn. I had been planning, quietly, for weeks without admitting it even to myself. The move I'd made that night was not impulsive. It was the result of a lifetime spent arranging contingencies, of always expecting that loyalty could be currency and also a liability. I slid into the driver's seat, stared at the building until my eyes watered, and whispered to the empty cab. Project Echo goes live tomorrow. 48 hours. That's all it takes. I tell myself, as if saying it aloud will steady the rhythm of what I've set in motion. The first day I tested the water. One anonymous packet sent to a client whose contract Mark had quietly reshaped. I didn't send accusations or drama, just a clean copy of the original agreement, dated and notarized, with a short note: please confirm this matches your records. Within hours, the client's general counsel called. Their voice was careful at first, then clipped. Lawyers are like bloodhounds when you hand them a scent. They don't sleep until they've followed the trail. Panic spreads differently than you expect. It's a quiet, efficient thing. It doesn't roar. It calls meetings. It triggers calendars and overnight flights. By late afternoon, automated systems I'd left to run years ago began replying to themselves in ways I had planned for, but never wanted to witness. Scheduled audits, pinged auditors, invoices redirected to the correct accounts. Flagged transactions lit up like alarm buoys on a dark sea. I'd seeded the system with truth in the places they thought were empty, and truth, once indexed, makes noise on its own. At midnight, my phone buzzed. Mark's name on the screen looked obscene. He sounded small on the call, the voice I remembered replaced by something brittle. "Dan, did you touch the servers?" he asked, as if proximity could equal guilt. I could hear panic in the corners of his sentence. "I left everything exactly where it belongs," I said. It was the exact truth. He didn't expect that. People who depend on illusions prefer theatrics to facts. They want a villain to pin their failures to, not a methodical unraveling. By morning, the niece's fake vendor accounts were frozen, wire holds, 2 calls from banks already investigating irregularities, and a compliance officer in our lobby who didn't know me but looked at me like a man who'd caught his breath in a storm. Chloe stormed into my old office as if she could burn the files with her presence. "You did this!" she accused, voice sharp and small all at once, like a child pretending to be brave. I looked at her the way a soldier looks at weather, inevitable and irrelevant, unless you're preparing for it. "You wouldn't even know where to start," I said. That was both a challenge and a fact. She screamed about lawyers and family and Uncle Mark fixing everything. She threw the word nepotism like it would land as a shield. It didn't. Mark wasn't in his office. He was in a conference room with federal auditors and a stack of subpoenas in front of him. He had spent years moving money in small increments, the kind of arithmetic designed to anesthetize oversight. But arithmetic is a language I read fluently. Numbers don't perform. They testify. I sat at my desk, guest badge clipped to my shirt, and drank coffee as if drinking could steady me. The buzz of the office felt musical in a way it never had before. People moved with the nervous precision of actors who've been handed new lines at the last minute. Security teams whispered into radios. The compliance director's face was slack with the weight of practical catastrophe. Clients I'd worked with for decades began calling, their voices careful, seeking reassurance, hinting they'd been misled. I gave them the same answer I'd given Mark. Facts. I don't offer comfort. I offer confirmation. By 3 in the afternoon, 2 figures walked past my window, boxes stacked under their arms, escorted by a security officer, who kept his voice low as if this were a mercy. Mark's face was pale, eyes hollowed. Chloe clutched a small handbag, like it contained some last piece of dignity. They looked as if the floors under them had become glass and were cracking. The sight would have been comic if not for the ruin trailing behind them. Families of employees who'd trusted company stability, vendors whose invoicing cycles were now a tangle, and the reputational ash that used to be our brand. I told myself then I should feel triumphant. Instead, a strange flatness settled across my chest. Satisfaction is a narrow thing when it arrives without celebration. It's more of a recalibration. The noise of consequences will take its course. I had not taken delight in the downfall so much as in the application of truth to a lie that had grown large enough to swallow decent people. I had dismantled a small empire of convenience, not out of malice alone, but out of necessity, to stop the ongoing theft of a life I'd invested in. That night, the headlines ran cautious phrases. Executive fraud, investigated. Company under audit. No names, not yet. The story would hunger for specifics, for faces to pin blame to, and the system of justice would do its slow, noisy work. I turned off my lamp, and for one long moment listened to the apartment settle around me. The world had shifted, and the echo of my action would ring out further than I wanted to measure. 2 weeks later, Mark's mugshot stared back at me from the front page of the Phoenix Business Journal. The headline was clean, clinical, almost polite. Local executive charged in multimillion-dollar fraud. Below it, his face looked smaller than I remembered, eyes hollow, jaw slack, like someone who'd finally run out of words to sell. The charges were stacked in neat bullet points: wire fraud, embezzlement, insider trading, and, beneath his name, one more: co-conspirator, Chloe Dempsey. The company folded in less than a week. Clients, who'd spent years pretending not to notice his shortcuts, suddenly discovered their moral compass. The website went dark, phones unanswered, inboxes full of out-of-office messages that would never be replaced. Everything he'd built on my back crumbled exactly the way bad architecture always does. Fast, loud, irreversible. I watched it happen from my kitchen table, morning light spilling over half-cold coffee and a newspaper that smelled of ink and closure. My phone buzzed with messages from old coworkers. Some sent emojis, some sent sympathy. Most sent the same 3 words. You knew, didn't you? I didn't explain. I just replied with one sentence. Facts speak louder than meetings. When the FBI's public filings went live, I searched them the way I used to search client rosters. My name appeared once, buried deep in the appendix. Source: confidential whistleblower. That single line was enough. I didn't need applause. I didn't need gratitude. All I needed was silence, the kind that comes when you've said everything worth saying, and the rest of the world finally catches up. I opened my laptop, found the encrypted folder labeled Project Echo, and hovered over the delete key for a full 10 seconds. Every file, every receipt, every copied email that had served its purpose. Then I pressed delete. Gone. Mission complete. I didn't go to the sentencing, but I read the transcript. Courtrooms sound the same in print, measured, antiseptic, everyone pretending justice is paperwork. Mark's lawyer tried to frame it as misguided ambition. Chloe cried, said she was following orders, that she didn't know the accounts were falsified. The judge listened, patient as gravity. Then came Mark's final statement before sentencing. I trusted the wrong man, he said. He was right. The niece got probation, community service, financial restitution, the kind of punishment that still lets you update your Instagram story. Mark wasn't so lucky. 7 years, minimum security, a lifetime ban from any position involving fiduciary responsibility. His smile in the mugshot was gone, replaced by a stare that almost looked like recognition. Almost. I didn't celebrate. There's no victory in cleaning up what should have been honest to begin with. I spent the afternoon clearing my desk at home, sorting through decades of files, shredding what didn't matter, archiving what did. The sound of the shredder was steady, rhythmic, like waves erasing footprints. That evening, I drove past the old office. The parking lot was empty, except for one flickering security light and a realtor's sign bolted to the grass. For lease. The building's windows reflected the sunset, like rows of glass coffins. I parked across the street and watched the last light fade from the top floor, the one where Mark used to give his Monday pep talks, where Chloe used to lean over the table pretending to take notes. The silence was absolute. For the first time in 22 years, I wasn't thinking about quarterly goals or client renewals. I wasn't thinking about betrayal or justice or revenge. I was thinking about how quiet peace actually is when it finally arrives. I stood there a long time, hands in my pockets, the desert wind moving over the asphalt. Sunlight caught the edge of the for lease sign, a sharp flash like a gavel striking wood. For the first time in 2 decades, I felt something close to freedom,